Hello, today's topic is functions in JavaScript. Without a doubt, functions are the most useful programming constructs in pretty much any language. They make sure that we can make our program modular. That is to say that they allow us to break down our code into small and manageable chunks. They additionally allow code reuse. Really, when you come to think of it, a function is just a chunk of code that has a name. This chunk takes parameters and may or may not produce a value as output. Functions in JavaScript are defined by using the keyword function. If you look on the screen, you can see on line number 2, where I just highlight this keyword function is being used to define a function. Now, there is no need or way to specify the return type of a function in JavaScript. This is very different from any other language that you might have seen. Usually, if you want to return something from a function, or even if you don't want to return anything from a function, you have to specify that using some keyword. Now, here we have a function that spans lines 2, 3, 4. You can see this function is named hello world. So first we put the keyword function and then a space, and then we put in the name of the function, hello world, and then parenthesis. And then the body of the function stays between the curly braces. This is the beginning curly brace and the end curly brace. And in this function, this is the most simple function that you can have. All we are doing is just printing a message saying hello world. So we are doing console.log and then printing the message. The way to invoke a function in JavaScript is by just typing the name of the function and then putting parenthesis next to it. So if we run this program now, let's see if we can run this. You can see this will print the message hello world in here. As I had just mentioned, you do not need to specify the return type of any data from the function. If you want to return something, just return it. So if you look at this code highlighted on the page on the screen, you can see here's this function called func returns value. It's returning a value 10 from it, but we do not need to specify the return type. And as I said already, there is really no way to specify the return type. When we print the output from this function, you can see on line 14, I'm invoking this function, func returns value, and then I'm putting the return value inside console.log. You can see the output here on the output screen. So that's the value that it prints out. So as I just said, you can return pretty much any data type from the JavaScript function without needing to specify the return type. So on line number 10, you just returned integer, the integer 10. If you substitute the integer by a string, suddenly the function would start returning a string. If you return it with a boolean value true or false, you would suddenly start returning true or false boolean values. So without needing to change the return type of the function, you can return whatever you want from the function itself. In fact, you can not only return the primitive data types such as integers, strings, and booleans, but you can also return other complex data types such as objects. One example is here between line 30 and 20. So this function returns a house object that contains two elements, roof and floor. Now, the way to return a complex data type such as an object from a JavaScript function is you say return, and here we are creating an anonymous object. This object doesn't have a name. The object starts with a curly brace on line 26 and ends with a curly brace on line 29. Make sure that if you are returning an object in this particular way, which is by not giving it a name, just creating an anonymous object, that the starting curly brace is on the same line as the return statement. If you forget this and instead you end up doing something like this, then what will happen is JavaScript will try to act smart. It'll think that you just accidentally forgot a semicolon here, in the same line as return, and that this curly brace is a completely different statement. So you should not be doing that. If you want to return an anonymous object from the function, the curly brace, starting curly brace should be in the same statement as the return. So on line 32 now you can see we are executing the function returns house right over here, and we are assigning the return value to a variable my house, and then we are printing the value of the property roof from the object my house. The output from this is present in the output window over here. It says my house.roof is of type shingle, which is what we defined earlier here. One thing I should mention here, since I started talking about anonymous functions and I did not really explain what anonymous object without explaining what an anonymous object is that there are two ways to return an object from a function, right? You could either return just like we did earlier between lines 26 and 29. Here we created an object. I mean, you know that an object is created when a curly brace starts and a bunch of properties are stuck inside the object, and then the curly brace ends. You might as well have not return an anonymous object. You might have done something like var house object equals, and then done this, and then so you might as well have done this, but it's just that I find that creating this temporary object, house object, just for the sake of returning really doesn't have much point to it. So I prefer the other way of just returning it this way without giving it a name. An object that has not been given a name is called an anonymous object. Now let's look at the next function in the code. So as you just saw, return house returns a house object, but here if you call returns house again, it will return another object with exactly the same values for roof and floor. I mean, you will again have a shingle roof and a concrete floor. So that's not really very useful. If you want to create more and more objects using functions, we probably want to be able to set the values of the properties as soon as you create them. So another way of doing this is like you pass parameters to this function. So this is the first time you're seeing parameters in functions. In JavaScript, just like you don't have to specify a return type for the function, you do not either need to specify any type for the variables. You don't even have to say var my roof. You just type any name that you want, parameter 1 and then parameter 2, and then you can use them within your function. So here we are saying return specific house function, which takes two parameters, my roof and my floor, and then it returns an object. Again, this is a house kind of an object, and the roof is being assigned the value my roof, which is the parameter, and then the floor, which is being assigned the value my floor, which is yet another parameter. So this function is now returning a house object which has its roof and floor values set using the parameters. If we see the output using output of these two statements, we are calling the return specific house, we are assigning the value red to the roof and blue to the floor, and then we are printing the roof. So if we look at the output, we can see that it says in the output window here, it says my house 1 dot roof is red. The variable that we were using was my house 1, and you can see that it matches up. Now here's another curious thing about JavaScript. Curious or interesting actually. When you can see here that we are again calling the return specific house function, and this time we are passing it exactly one parameter. If you pay attention, you can see here when we declared the function, we actually declared it with two parameters, and we are using both of them. Now this is the interesting thing about JavaScript. Even though you declare a function with x number of parameters, you can pass more or less number of parameters when you actually invoke the function, and this is not an error. What ends up happening will depend on the logic of your program, but it is perfectly legal to pass more or less number of parameters. So here you can see we are trying to print the roof, of this new object that we created, the house2 object that we created, and then we are trying to print the floor object that we created. Here's a mistake. We are printing the floor, and we should put floor here. Let's clear the screen here on the output window and rerun the program. So you can see here this would print the only roof. So here we get in the output window only roof, but the floor is actually printed as undefined. We did not pass in the second parameter, so the floor gets assigned an undefined value, and that's what is being printed here. But you see that the JavaScript ran just fine. It did not crash or anything. So just make note of that. And here you saw we just returned one. We actually passed one less parameter than what was required. And in the second case, this is another invocation of the same function. We are passing 3 parameters, which is one more than what the function was originally declared with. So let me fix this mistake here again. This should be floor. So the first parameter gets assigned to the roof, the second parameter gets assigned to the floor, and the third parameter is just ignored because in the logic of your function, in the code of your function, you didn't really use this parameter. You did not expect a third parameter, so JavaScript will just ignore it. When we look at the output of this one, let's clear the screen here on output and rerun it. So you see it says my house 3.floor, here is roof. My house 3.floor, here is floor. So the 2 parameters that we pass, the first one and the second one, they do get used. The third one is just ignored. Now here is yet another interesting thing. I just said that in JavaScript you can have more or less parameters. What is the use of it? Why would you ever want to put in more parameters than you declared your function with? And the interesting thing is that JavaScript allows you to access all the parameters, whether you declared them or not, through this interesting variable called arguments that is available in pretty much any function. This is a very interesting kind of variable. It behaves like an array in the sense that it has a length property associated with it, and that you can access elements of it using this square bracket notation and passing an index. But apart from this, it does not have any other array functions, but it does allow you access to all the parameters. So here we just declared a function called no parameter taken here, and you see that we haven't passed any parameters in here. But inside this function, first we are printing how many arguments have been passed by printing the value of the variable arguments dot length, and then we are iterating over the arguments variable. We are saying go from 0 to the length of the arguments and print each of the arguments. So it will print the actual passed values to this function. So if we now run this program, if we execute this thing, you can see that I am passing to this function no parameter taken here the values 1, 2, and 3. 3 string values 1, 2, and 3. Let's see what it prints. So here you can see that the no parameter taken here function first prints I have these many parameters, and then it says 3. So it knows through the arguments variable that it has 3 parameters passed in, and then it prints the 3 variables, says argument 0 is 1, and then 1 is 2, and then 2 is 3. So these are the 3 elements in the arguments variable. Once again, I want to reiterate that arguments is not a true array. It does not have all the functions. It doesn't have actually pretty much any function of the array type, but it does try and behave like an array in the sense that it has a length property and that you can access its element using the indices. Let's scroll down a little bit and see something new and cool. Now everything in JavaScript is an object. Apart from the very, very simple primitive data types, everything else in JavaScript is an object. Even functions are objects. So The way I can prove this is by saying function with object and attaching and trying to attach a property to it using the object syntax. So I'm saying function with object dot and then the property name attached variable, and I assign it the value arg me gotten attached variable. You can print this and see that this indeed works. So when you see function with object dot attached variable and try to print it using console.log, you can see here it says functions variable arg me gotten attached variable. So that clearly tells that functions are objects as well. Now let's have a mind bender for you. What do you think the code between lines 81 and 83 does? So at the first look, you can see some of it seems familiar. You have this function keyword here, and then if you follow along till this ending curly brace, this is just a regular function. The name of the function is an interesting function, and it prints a line saying I am an interesting function. What is not familiar is the starting curly brace on line number 81, and then the ending curly brace, ending curly parenthesis followed by the beginning and ending parenthesis here again. So what this code is doing is between the parenthesis beginning here and the parenthesis ending here, whatever you have is being treated as a single statement. So this single statement defines a function. So the parenthesis says I have a function inside me. And then when you put a starting curly brace, starting parenthesis and ending parenthesis after it, what it means is whatever is to the left side of me is a function, and let's execute it. So effectively you declared a function and executed it at the same point of time. You can see the output of this over here in the output window where it says I am an interesting function. Now here is another way of declaring functions. This was just a neat trick. You will see it being used often when you look at professional libraries and so on. But here is another way of declaring a function. So far, whenever we declared a function, we said use the keyword function, and then we said the name and then parenthesis followed by the curly braces, right? So this is how we usually do it. Another way of doing this is just the left hand side of look at the statements, the highlighted portions that I just showed. You have this function. You did not provide a name. You just started the parenthesis, ended the parenthesis, and went on ahead writing the body of the function. And then you put a on the left hand side of this function keyword, you put a equals, and on the left hand side you have a variable f holder. What this does is the highlighted portion is called what is known as an anonymous function, a function that was created with no name. And after you created it, you assign the anonymous function to a variable called f holder. So now f holder is a variable that holds a function, right? So f holder is effectively a function. You might as well have done it the other way and you just set function f holder directly. You might have typed f holder here, but this is yet another way of writing a function. The key point to note here is that you can define a function just by doing this much, and this kind of function without a name is called an anonymous function. The way to invoke an anonymous function is by invoking it with the name that you assign to the variable that the function got assigned to, and then putting a starting and ending parenthesis in front of it. So if we look at the execution of this function, the last piece here, it says what do I do, which is exactly what the anonymous function has tried to print earlier. So this is it about functions. Next time we'll tackle another topic. Enjoy.